My name is Ryan Moran, and I worked with Dr. Andrea Krieg on the project titled Disorder and Crime in Chicago Community Areas. Broken windows theory is the theoretical framework for our project. It asserts that minor levels of disorder and subsequent higher crime levels are related, and not just related, but linked causally. When they talk about disorder, we're talking about two types, physical and social. Physical disorder would be things such as litter on the ground, burned out residential units, and graffiti, while social disorder is concerned with people, so things like homelessness, prostitution, and loitering. The theory asserts that disorderly conditions break down the informal social control of a neighborhood, which directly causes crime. Subsequent research has supported the idea of broken windows theory, but questions do exist about the mechanism of the relationship between disorder and crime and the veracity or accuracy of the theory. Broken windows theory has influenced policing strategies nationwide, particularly with regard to order maintenance policing strategies. These are also known as disorder policing, broken windows policing, and stop and frisk. It's the idea that a department can prevent serious crime from occurring by stopping less serious ones. So basically, if you stop the little stuff, you can keep the big things from happening. And it's an extremely famous example is New York City. There are concerns, though, as research has shown that there is a disproportionate impact on minority communities, especially with the stop and frisk policies in New York City. So the research question for this study is, how does disorder present itself in neighborhoods that have crime rates above and below the median rate in the city of Chicago? To answer this question, I measured disorder in Chicago neighborhoods and compared it to crime rates to determine the correlations, with the goal of seeing how disorder varies in its presentation in areas with more and less crime. This study also adds to the conversation surrounding the basis of those policing strategies that we mentioned on the previous slide. Before we go further, I want to define some variables just to clarify everything in case there's any confusion. For our crime in this study, the data is collected from the Chicago Police Department, which provides data for all of their community areas every year. We used index crimes, which includes homicide, criminal sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. Both physical and social disorder types are measured via a pre-tested, accepted definition in the form of an inventory from a British group of researchers who are cited here. An example of a question from this inventory is there any evidence of people, two or more, loitering on the street, just hanging out or congregating for no apparent reason? So that is how the inventory would measure loitering. And then community areas. These are 77 geographic areas similar to neighborhoods that have been historically used by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. For the methodology of the study, we took a sample of 10 community areas by crime numbers. The sample was stratified by crime data, so we found the median number of index crime incidents in the past year across the entire city, and then selected 5 from above the median and 5 from below the median. From those 10 community areas, we selected 10 face blocks for a total of 100. A face block is the side of the street that you are examining, and I'll explain that more here in a second. So we did a virtual street audit using Google Street View and that disorder inventory that we mentioned before. So how this works is you go on Google Maps, and the Street View function allows you to literally, it would be as if you were walking down the street, deliberately examining the features on the street and answering the questions to the inventory. And the face block comes in because you only do one side of the street. And I included a couple examples here of how things were coded doing this virtual street audit. So for example, the first image here on the left of the two gentlemen in the red, based on the definition of loitering given earlier by the inventory, that would constitute loitering. However, there is a sign up the street denoting this area as a bus stop. So that was not coded as loitering, whereas the other image here of the 4 individuals hanging out on the sidewalk, that was coded as loitering because they're congregating and there's no apparent reason for that. So for our purposes, we didn't actually run stats on all 61 measures despite collecting data on all of them. So I included this table for people who are viewing this to get an idea of the breadth of the measures we looked at. So some of the things that are on here are street features, the condition of the street, whether or not there's outdoor lighting, and the number of street features, which would be speed limit signs, crosswalks, speed reducing humps, and then amenities. So number of public courtesies present. This is non-residential trash cans and recycling bins, vending machines, pay phones, newspaper dispensers, things of that nature. And you can see that there's a wide variety of things that are covered here. So it's a pretty in-depth look at the disorder present on the examined streets. So to take a closer look at 2 parts of this table, on the top here, this is the physical disorder section. And you can see under the bold physical disorder, these are the measures that we use to get an idea of the physical disorder present. So whether or not there was strewn garbage or litter on the street, abandoned cars, graffiti that had been painted over, or vandalized signs. And the descriptive statistics here can tell you a few things about the physical disorder that we looked at. For one, the means will tell you that the first column, the mean, will tell you that in the examined areas that we looked at, they're not really experiencing that much physical disorder. All the means are extremely low. And then on the bottom, for overall condition of the neighborhood, these are our perception-based questions. And so while technically everything in the inventory is subject to interpretation of the observer, these indicators here, whether the neighborhood appeared to be safe to live, safe to walk at night, and what its apparent economic class was, that's totally independent of anything that's on the street. It's entirely how the observer interprets it. For our statistical analysis, we used the program Stata and ran correlations between the crime rates and the disorder measures. We also ran t-tests between crime rates and disorder to test whether any observed difference in the means between neighborhoods that were above and below the median crime was statistically significant. The correlations find that there are actually weak correlations between the visual indicators of disorder and high crime. So this would be the graffiti, the littering, the loitering, things that are visually apparent. While weak, the correlations were in the expected direction. What that means is we saw a positive correlation between physical disorder and crime. So as an area experiences higher crime, it also experiences more physical disorder. Same thing for loitering and the vacant lot condition. We did find moderate correlations between perception-based indicators and crime. So those 3 questions I mentioned with the table, whether or not it appeared to be safe to live in, safe to walk at night, and it's what economic class the neighborhood is characterized by. And those were slightly stronger than the visual indicators, but still nothing that we would consider a strong correlation. The t-tests reveal that there are significant differences between neighborhoods with more and less crime when looking at a variety of the indicators. So it could be that there's no significant difference between the higher and lower crime neighborhoods, but the statistical analysis showed that there in fact was. So our results show that the perceptions of the observer matter much more than the actual disorder measures present. And this is important in the context of the policing strategies that we mentioned earlier. So order maintenance or disorder policing is based on the idea that there's a strong correlation between disorder and crime, but this study actually had results that were to the contrary. So our kind of concluding remark is that policing strategies need to account for the lack of clarity in the causality of broken windows theory. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, both of our emails are listed on the introductory slide, and feel free to reach out with any questions.